Originating from the David Letterman Communications Building on the campus of Ball State University, this is Pleasant Valley Sunday. Hold on, kids. We're going to have a lot of fun tonight. Kevin Nolley here with you. I never forgot my name yet. The man called in a little while ago, and I got reprimanded for singing along with the songs. The man doesn't like that. I used that term, I don't know, maybe a year ago with one of my undergraduate classes. And I'm like, the man. They're like, who? The man? You know, and then I woke up the other day and I found out that I was the man. But hey, we've got a great show tonight. First, I'd like to shout out to all of our listeners out there in California. We love you. And we're out here in Muncie, Indiana at Ball State University, named after the Ball brothers who developed the canning jars. I know that's what you're asking. And I want to thank Paul Wilson for recommending. This is called The Show of Paul's or Psychopolic or something like that. We've got Paul Beach, Paul Holland, and Paul Wilson. They have all played with the association, and of course the association, their family to WCRD, and just a great group of guys. We've interviewed everyone, basically. That's the main 6, 7, with the exception of Ted Luschel. I don't know if we're ever going to get that, but if anybody has any way to help me, we'll be more than happy to interview him. And if the magic of technology is working right, let's see. Do we have Paul Beach on the air with us? Hello, Paul. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
There we go. We got it now. Hey, Paul, welcome to Pleasant Valley Sunday.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
Hey, my headphones just fell apart, but what can I tell you? We're running a 2-car funeral around here. Paul, this is an exciting show tonight because we're going to have the 3 Pauls talking about their time with the association. And let me start by asking, when did you first play with the association? How did you get hooked up with them? And what instruments were you playing in what capacity?
Well, my first performance on them on stage was actually in the middle of the Happy Together tour in 1984, where I just sang. A couple of the guys in the band had left, and so I filled in for the remainder of the Happy Together tour. And then after the Happy Together tour, they called me up, and I started full-time. So my first gig full-time with them, actually playing and singing, playing bass and singing, was, I think, New Year's Eve, leading to the year 1985.
Okay, so you started out singing in 1985. Were you by chance with the group when they? There was a show where they did Along Comes Mary, but Jules Alexander was singing lead. It was like a variety show. I want to say somebody like Marilyn McCoo was doing the announcing that day, the host.
Oh, yeah, that was Solid Gold, and that was 1988.
Okay, wow, there you go. Just pulled it right out there. What did you eventually play? And were you like playing bass and piano at a later point?
No, I just played bass, and that started in the beginning of 1985. It was during the Happy Together tour that I just sang, then 84.
Okay, and if you mentioned that, I apologize.
Right.
What were your initial feelings when you started working with the guys? Do you remember like some of the first thoughts you had, like, wow, these guys can sing?
Well, that's an interesting question because I had seen them perform so many times, and I knew them because I had done a lot of shows with them, working with Gary Puckett. So I was really familiar with what they did and who they were. And so I was excited to be a part of it. And my background is a vocal group ensemble anyway. I started at the age of 8 or 9 singing in a boys' choir and sang in ensemble groups all the way up through college. So it was a real pleasure to be able to do that in a popular music format.
When you were growing up, did you have who were your favorite groups? What particular genre of rock did you really, really dig?
I liked anything that had a good melody, a good storyline, and especially good vocals. That doesn't narrow it down a whole lot for you. I'm sorry, but
No.
I have very eclectic taste in music.
Well, but that includes a lot of association songs. Good melody,
Absolutely.
good vocals, good bass lines, everything.
Right.
Tell me a little bit. You've been you're a bass player, but do you remember the first time you picked up a musical instrument? Were your parents musical? Were you kind of forced to go to piano lessons at the age of 3 or something?
Something like that. Hi, Mom. She's listening.
All that money, it sure paid off.
Yeah, it was a wonderful experience. No, actually, both my parents are musicians, piano players, pianists, and my dad was also a composer and a music professor. And they attempted to give me lessons from a lady in the neighborhood, in the town we grew up in. And I didn't take to it real well. I fought it because I wanted to be outside playing, and I was probably 6 or 7 at the time, I guess. But in terms of actually picking up an instrument of my own and wanting to do it myself, I think I was about 16 or 17 and picked up guitar, started playing that.
Well, we've all been there where we took piano lessons and we had to practice, and we all started with chopsticks, and I get that. But so music is really in the very fabric of your soul. You know, if your parents had that talent, you know, I get where you're coming from with that. When you were on stage with the association, do you have any fond memories of a particular incident or something that happened randomly that is just something you wouldn't mind sharing with us?
Oh, there are so many. I'll just have to pick one, I guess. I have 2 favorite memories, I guess. One of them is the first time I sang with them on stage. I remember the rest of the bands from the Happy Together tour lining up behind the stage, looking to see how this was going to sound because it was a new lineup. And we had rehearsed down here in Southern California for a couple of days before we went back out, and it was at the Pikes Peak Convention Center, or the Civic Center in Colorado Springs. And I just remember the first couple of notes that we hit, everybody just hit it dead on. They were so motivated, and everybody had their ears on, so to speak, and brought their A game. And the show went so well. We thought it would sound good, but I didn't anticipate how good it would sound and how good it would feel. Got goosebumps. I'm getting goosebumps right now thinking about it. The other time would be we played at the Grand Ole Opry.
Wow.
And that was such a thrill. We didn't even know we were playing at the building itself because our itinerary just said Opryland, and we thought we were playing out in the park somewhere. But it turned out that we were actually playing in the main room, and I guess our shows sold out really fast, and we were there 1 or 2 days. I don't remember. Paul Holland might be able to fill us in on that. But I just remember that those people were so together and had everything prepared for us in every manner you could possibly think of. Speaking of the staff of the Grand Ole Opry. And we walked into the building after they showed us our green rooms, and there's all this equipment on stage. And I told Bruce, that looks like the kind of setup that we have, thinking it was for another band, right?
Right.
And we went over and looked and said, everything's exactly right. And then, man, I wish our setup was like this. Anyway, the stage manager came over and says, you guys ready for sound check? And when we said, we're playing here? And he said, yes, you are. And he said, we're really excited to have you guys here. And it was kind of unusual to have popular music bands in there as opposed to more country music-oriented bands. So that's what caught us by surprise. But they had bought the Greatest Hits CD and had studied it, set up everything, and dialed in our microphones to the extent that our sound check took about 10 minutes, and normally it was a lot longer than that because of all the open vocal mics. And that was just a wonderful, wonderful experience. It sounded so good in there, and we were so honored to be there, and I'm still excited just talking about it. Then my daughter, Ruth, ended up working there years later, and kind of came full circle on that.
Hey, you mentioned a few things in that last statement. You were talking about Bruce Pictor, the drummer.
Yes.
Bruce is a great guy. What are your feelings?
And a great drummer.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about your thoughts on his drumming.
Oh, my God. I actually first saw Bruce playing with Gary Puckett in San Diego in 1980, late 80, maybe early 81. And I went to listen to Gary Puckett's band because I'd heard that he was looking for a bass player, and Gary was from San Diego. And I knew Gary's brother Brian from up here in North San Diego County where I live. And on the advice of a mutual friend, I went and checked them out. Then I went and talked to Brian and told him I was interested in auditioning. So he introduced me to Gary, and I had seen Bruce play, and when I saw him play, I said, I want to play in this band. Of course, Gary sang great, and the rest of the band sounded great, but Bruce was just such a heartbeat of the band. And Gary's brother, Brian, too, was a real solid drummer, and they would switch off between drums and percussion. And I just so wanted to play in that band. But the moment I really remember was our first rehearsal when we started working on our first song, and it was one of the Gary and his brothers wrote songs that they called it their publishing company was called the Puckett Brothers. And I don't remember which song it was, but I remember the feeling that I felt when we first started playing. And Bruce and I just were like a hand in glove. It was just magic from the very beginning. And from that point on, it was just really working on interpretation and subtleties and trying to figure out a way to make the song work and constantly working on that stuff. And it was like going to school for me. But getting paid to do it and just having so much fun along the way. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. Brucero, if you're listening, we love you. I mean, Bruce is, he is a just genuinely graceful guy. He is just humble. Love talking with him. Very personable. And if you're friends with him on Facebook, if you're not, you should be. Hey, if you're just joining us right now, you're listening to Pleasant Valley Sunday here on CRD, and our guest is Mr. Paul Beach, a great musician himself. We're talking about when he played with the association. If you've got a question for him, you can just send that question to me on Facebook. You can find me there at KEVIN NOLLEY, and if I can, and it's an appropriate question, I'll sure pose it. Hey, you mentioned something. You grew up in California, right, along the coast?
No, about an hour east of the coast,
okay.
In Riverside, California.
Were you a surfer?
I wanted to be.
Okay.
I actually moved down to the coast in 1973 and started surfing then.
Okay. Well, I being landlocked here in Indiana, it's a stereotype. I know the other day, or a couple weeks back, we had a great actress, Chelsea Swain, on, and she's out there from Malibu originally. And I said, "Did you grow up with a pool?" And she goes, "No, we grew up with the ocean across the street." So, every time I think of surfers and blonde hair and, Converse tennis shoes and things like that, stereotyping. But anyway, I had to ask that. Hey, tell us, you sent us a link to a song, and I'm pulling that up now, and I believe is it called Slidin' By?
Yes, sir.
Tell me a little bit about that and its genesis.
That's a really good word to describe that, actually.
Well, hey, I majored in Latin. It's okay.
And it worked.
There,
Let's start at the beginning then. I was at a point in my life, and I think most people that are involved with any kind of creative endeavor encounter this, that I was going through an identity crisis, didn't know what I wanted to do, where I belonged. I was not out on the road anymore, but I was still involved with music, and a friend of mine told me that I should start writing songs. And I had stabbed at it a bit back in the 70s and got discouraged with it and got involved with other things in life. But I tried to figure out, based on my friend's advice, and he really kept after me, what I should write about. And so I started looking online for inspiration, and I kept seeing the same thing over and over again. It says, write what you know. Don't try to be something you aren't. So I thought, well, what am I feeling? Well, my feeling is I am so completely undecided about who I want to be, what I want to do, where I belong. Maybe I'll just write about that anguished feeling that you have about trying to figure it out and not even knowing how to try to figure it out. So the song is based on that, and then it's a little bit tongue-in-cheek here and there with the lyrics about what I would do if I had A, B, or C.
You know, Paul, I'm 48, and I'm still working on my personal trajectory. And, you know, you wrote that in your 20s, I assume, right?
No.
Okay, I apologize.
I was in my wait a minute. I was my mid-50s.
Okay, I'm sorry. I for some reason, I don't know why I was thinking the 20s, but it's interesting how we use music as a medium, as a therapeutic tool. And I had this conversation with Terry Kirkman before, and I'd love to find, I have these archives scattered all over the place. Paul Wilson, you probably have that. But I can tell by just describing the narrative here that you use this in a way to, you know, better your life and to answer questions. Do you think at any point that, you know, you were kind of suffering from depression or anxiety during that time?
Oh, absolutely.
And
yes.
Did you find that in general, picking up an instrument just kind of released that as like a catharsis?
Yeah. That was a surprising thing. When I got to the point where I had a mix that I was happy with, I sat down and listened to it in an environment completely separate from the studio, which I like to do to remove myself from that work environment. And I got through with it, and I just had this big smile on my face, you know, and wasn't at all like the feeling I had when I wrote the song, you know.
Right. I get that. I'm not a great musician. I actually went to college on a voice scholarship, but I get that, and I think our listeners do too. Before we play the song, I have a question here. Somebody is asking, did you ever play with the Mamas and Papas?
Yes, I did.
Can you tell us a little bit about that, the dates, a little bit about, you know, reflecting on that? Did you work with Michelle Phillips, or was she in at that time? Or?
No.
Okay.
I knew that the people in the band, you got to understand all of these, well, you know this already from talking to other musicians, that all these bands work so much together that everybody kind of knew each other. We're so used to doing shows with each other. And so when I got invited to play, it was just kind of like joining family. The history of going back a bit on that was that Spanky, who replaced Mama Cass in the band, from Spanky and Our Gang, Spanky McFarlane.
And if you... I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you. I was just going to jump in. If those of you that forgot, Spanky and Our Gang did I'd Like to Get to Know You.
They Will Never Be the Same.
That's right.
Give a Damn.
Yeah, Give a Damn. Some great songs, but just wanted to give people a little background. Go ahead, Mr. Beach.
Okay. Back in 82 or 83, Spanky had been singing with the Mamas and Papas, and then John decided to take a break, John Phillips, that is. And we were talking one day at one of the shows, and we said, why don't you just come play with us? And so we talked to Gary and our road manager, Gary Puckett, and said, why don't we try it? So long story short, it worked out. So she was using Gary's band as her backup band, and also did that on the Happy Together tour. So I already had history with playing with her, and already had a lot of her songs under my belt, plus some Mamas and Papas songs that she covered in the show. So when they were looking for a bass player, this would have been in '89, she mentioned me, and then I knew a couple of guys in the band as well. So they called me up, asked me if I'd be interested, but they wanted me to look for a drummer out here on the West Coast, and asked if there's somebody I was interested in playing with. And I said, absolutely, because there's a guy by the name of Dave Bronson, really good drummer. He played with the Righteous Brothers for about 35, maybe 40 years. he and I are both from Riverside, and we had joked for years and years about playing the same band together at some point. So I called him up, asked him if he was interested, and I waited till afternoon because I figured that would be the better thing to do. And he still was asleep when I called him, but he'd just gotten home from Australia. And I said, "You want to go out with the M's and P's?" And we thought we finally have our opportunity to work together. And he goes, "Man, I just got back from Australia." And just to give you some point of reference, he'd just gotten back from doing the Dirty Dancing tour with Bill Medley. And he said, "Well, where are they going?" And so, "We're supposed to be in Hawaii for 3 weeks." "Okay, call me later." Went back to sleep. So we did a couple of tours. It was a great experience. The lineup was John Phillips, Scott McKenzie. Denny had some theater obligations in Nova Scotia, so he couldn't do it. It was Spanky and Mackenzie Phillips. And so I got to work with Dave and got to work with the Mamas and Papas, and it was really interesting because it was the first band like that I played in that had so many different styles of music as opposed to a sort of a general approach to the same style with some of the other bands I played with. So it was challenging and fun, and I didn't have to sing, so I could just focus completely on playing. We were supposed to go to China and had a 6-week tour booked, China starting in Hong Kong, and had to get all our paperwork ready with the State Department. And got up one morning to get a cup of coffee and turned on CNN, and there's this guy standing in Tiananmen Square in front of a tank.
Oh, yeah. Iconic.
And that's when I knew it. I said, "Yep, we're not going." So I got a call from New York right after that. He said, "Have you seen the TV?" And I went, "Yeah." And he goes, "I'm sorry, the State Department called us and said the tour is off. All cultural exchanges are canceled." So that would have been a really exciting experience. At that time, I was going through some personal stuff, and I realized that was God's sign to me with that guy in front of that tank that I needed to stay home and be closer with my family. So it's much more complicated than that, but sometimes you just know what you need to do. And it was a hard decision, but it was an easy decision at the same time. But it was a great experience working with the Mamas and Papas, and every show went really well. I got to work also with Dusty Hanvey, guitar player, who I knew from the grassroots and also from being from the Riverside County area. And so it was a little bit like Hold Home Week in the band. It was really nice.
Well, that is, that it was a moment in history that if, those of the age of 40 and older, we remember that. And it certainly was a period that, that certainly punctuated the timeline. Before we play your song, what are your favorite association tunes and why?
Oh, my gosh. First of all, thank you for even considering playing my song. That's really exciting for me.
Hey, we love doing this kind of stuff. And that's because, well, we really like to tell stories, especially I do. I really believe that what we do here, in addition to playing music, is we're telling a story. And this is part of you. And our listeners like it. And, I really don't know how many because, we're on the net. I know there are because we get weird questions, sometimes inappropriate comments. Ireland, Iraq one time, California. It's not a foreign country, but here in Indiana, we think so. But no, it's our pleasure to play your music. But go ahead with your favorites.
I don't know that I have any favorites. I like almost all. But I actually do like all of them. Every one of them has a different challenge for me in how to approach it. For example, the song "Everything That Touches You" has a really challenging bass line at the top of the song, and I got a chance to talk to the bass player that originally recorded that one time and asked him how I approached it. And he goes, "I don't know. I just sat down and had a couple of minutes and just played it." Thanks a lot, sir. But then he actually showed me. It was nice.
By the way, that song, "Everything That Touches You," is there's a great story from Bruce Pichter about that song. It's one of his favorites. And he tells a story about how a young woman and I think he was in high school or college, a young woman that had a great influence on his life. She brought him home and said, "I want you to hear this song." And he said it was a real life marker. I'm not doing the story justice, but that's his favorite song. And as you know, he and Jim double that now when they're playing as the full 6-piece ensemble. But
I think he doubled with maybe Paul Holland or Jules, maybe all three of them. I don't exactly remember, but I know he sang on it when we played it together as well. But certainly I love that song, Never My Love, no question. Beautiful song, Cherish, Long Comes Mary. I thought we did a really nice version of Walk Away Renee.
Oh, yeah, the Left Bank.
That was fun, that version. Along Comes Mary. It's really hard to pin down which one I like the best because every one of them had different musical things that I liked about it. That, you know, if you play a song 100 times, which we probably did, if you're really into it, you feel it and you hear it different and you always bring something different to it. You try to be as consistent as you can to play it well, but then everybody is feeling it in their own way. And as a band, you listen to each other and try to make the magic happen with the given circumstances you have. So there'll be some slight variations here and there, but at that level, where people are listening so well to each other, even the surprises that came were usually really pleasant surprises that it's not like we would change the song or anything, maybe just a tiny little different thing here and there, but the songs themselves are so strong that, well, let me put it another way. The sign of a good song, in my opinion, and from some of the songwriting classes that I took, is that you could probably play a good song in just about any style you wanted to, and it would hold up because it has a good story, it has a good melody, it has maybe another quantity about it, a subline or harmony or whatever it is that also glues that song together. So you could do just about anything you want with a good song, and I think most of the songs in the show list that we played were like that. We obviously didn't play the entire catalog on stage, but I don't think I ever really got tired of the songs for those reasons.
There you go, folks. Honest answer.
And one other.
Yeah.
We did a lot of gigs where we sang the national anthem for events, and that was one of my favorite songs to sing with them. It was just the six of us out there, sometimes with one microphone. In fact, the biggest crowd I played with them was at the start-finish line of the Winston 500 at the Charlotte Motor Speedway, if you can imagine that. And there was about 200,000 people there, and the echo was just ferocious coming off those speakers. And we're all bunched tightly together, listening to each other as well as we can. And there's one microphone there in front of us, the kind of microphone that you have in your junior high school auditorium where the teachers tap on it to see if it's working, right? And yet that was one of the most exciting experiences and sounded so good and just so thrilling that it's just one of the things that's forever embedded in my memory. And a lot of the others, too. We did a lot of national anthems for sporting events and various other community events, those kinds of things. And that was fun because you really got the essence and the soul of the band from the vocals that way.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've been talking with Paul Beach. He is an associate. You're a part of the club. It's an honor. This is our Paulology tonight, psychopolic, whatever you want to call it. Paul Beach, Paul Holland, and Paul Wilson. Paul, we want to thank you again. We're going to play out with your song, Sliding By. Just a reminder, the association is out on tour with the Happy Together Tour. I believe they're out in California this week. I hope that's right. I think so. And again, we want to thank you for your time. And we want you to come back, and we wish you the best of luck.
Thank you so much, Kevin, and thank you, Paul Wilson, and my family, and all the friends that have been writing to me on Facebook and saying they're listening in. I love all you guys, and Kevin, you're doing a great thing there, and as a musician and a fellow traveler in this thing we call life, I appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. Everyone here sliding by. Paul Beach, 91.3 CRD. We're always better.
Sitting by the side of the road, thinking about where to go. Do I go left? Do I go right? How am I supposed to know? If I had a notion of what to do, maybe I would have a clue. Do I go back? Do I go on? What have I got to lose? I'm sliding by. Time flies, time stops, maybe or not. If I had the time, I'd own a clock. Then I know for sure if I knew or not. If there was time, I'd buy a lot. When I get the notion of what to do, maybe I'll have a clue. Then I'll go left, then I'll go right. Maybe I'll go on. I'm sliding by. Life is gliding by. I'm looking down a blind alley, both eyes tightly closed, and hiding far from the mirror and everything that I don't wanna know. I'm sliding by. Life is gliding by. Do I go left? Do I go right? Do I go left? Do I go right?
Sliding by, Paul Beach, hiding by the mirror. That was a great lyric. Great song, Paul. 91.3 CRD, you're in tune with Pleasant Valley Sunday. Kevin Nolley here with you. It is 25 minutes in front of 7 o'clock. We're going to pay a bill, take a break, and on the other side of the break, we have Paul Holland. 91.3 CRD, we are always better.